What day is it? It's Monday, November 27th. It's about 5:15 p.m. We are, it's Eric Osborne, marketing director at Bungie, Luke Smith, game director, Destiny franchise. What do you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a game director working on Destiny.
And Mark Noseworthy. Nobody knows what you do now. What do you do now?
I take out the trash.
Take out the trash.
Yeah, no. I'm a project lead on Destiny.
Project lead on Destiny, and so we have some
Luke's partner in crime for the last few years.
Yeah. So we had been running a series of podcasts that were focused on features and development of Destiny 2 as we sort of rolled up to September 6th. It's been a while since we recorded a podcast, partially because some folks have been out of the office, partially because we've been really busy. But we wanted to take the opportunity this week because we have a bunch of conversations rolling that we think merit us focusing on, talking about with our community.
We want to get the band back together, kind of for like we're gonna play the hits. Yep. We're gonna play the hits kind of one last time.
Yeah, and I think certainly this probably isn't the last time all three of us might appear on a podcast, but going forward, we want to bring in some other people who are responsible for other aspects of the game, people working on like the rewards and progression systems, sandbox, Christopher Barrett.
Yeah, I was
from
gonna
the
say,
live perspective.
I think Barry is like a really notable absence because being a game director on Destiny 2 is totally a full-time job, and Barry is going to be overseeing the DLCs, the live events, like the seasonal content as the game director for Destiny 2, and he's just out of office this week, and we would have loved to have him here. And I've been texting with him
all weekend,
and
pretty much nonstop for 6 months. We've been texting with Barry and Scott.
And it's a really interesting place to be. Talking to Barry, it's sort of not in charge of, but sort of minding the entire experience from the big releases down to the smallest tweaks that happen in the game. It's a lot to try to encompass and try to sit astride, and you have to rely on a lot of teams to inform what goes into every single aspect of the game. But ultimately, he's trying to look at it from a player perspective and think about what are the most purposeful things we can do with our time and our resources that are going to have the most impact for the most players at any given moment. And I think that's maybe an okay segue to talk about where we are right now with Destiny 2. We're how many weeks after launch, and we're obviously entertaining a lot of feedback from the community, particularly the hardcore, the hobbyists, people that you would call collectors, people who
we've been so internally, like we've talked about. I don't know how much of the designation's interesting. I think some of it's mildly interesting. Yeah. Historically, we've sorted players into 3 buckets. I don't know that these are totally the right 3 buckets, but I think conversationally it's interesting. Our tourists is the first bucket, and we think those are players who maybe play the campaign, maybe finish it, maybe churn out. Collectors, we've historically called, those players, have like a mid-level engagement. They might play for, 100 hours or play some amount of the end game, some amount of that content. And then hobbyists, and these are players for whom Destiny really represents sort of a lifestyle game. Yep. And I mean, when I say lifestyle game, I'm talking about the game that you can kind of return to, in some cases every day, in some cases every week. But it's a game that when you come back to it, you have a bunch of excuses or reasons to play it. And when I say excuses and reasons, I'm really talking about both of those things in like the exclusively positive light. Like if you have a game that you love, you really want. If you have a game that you love, you really want reasons to log in, and you want the game to give you those reasons because it's something you love doing. And I think where we're at today, to bring it all the way around, is Destiny 2 is a game that doesn't have enough excuses or reasons to play for those hobbyist players.
If there's a category of those 3 that are underserved right now, it is that sort of enthusiast player, the player that wants to play because that's where their friends are playing, because they want to go on the hunt for gear or build their character up.
Yeah, the thing that's interesting is like at Bungie, we have all 3 of these types of players.
Yep.
Right? Like in this room, I don't know which category you'd be in, but you're certainly the hobbyist, Luke. Like on the hobbyist scale, you're like 98th or 99th percentile for like time played in Destiny. Probably probably top 100 in the world if you include your like time played on like private builds here, right? Like,
yeah, and like we actually looked at some of this right before, like right at the console PC breakpoint, because we were analyzing the economy and finding that players have too many legendary, like players are accumulating legendary shards, and they have a bunch of them piled up, and I was in the top 1% in console of total legendary. Just I mean, yes,
and I'm not like, I wish I had more legendary shards for, because of the pace that I'm playing at. You know, I've got like a young child at home, and I'm also making my way through Zelda. I'm much more on the tourist, you know, somewhere between tourist and collector, right? Like, I still play Destiny 1 for a few hundred hours or whatever, but in terms of where I'm at with Destiny 2 right now, I'm more occupying that space of a player. And then we have folks out in the middle. I'm sure you're like more right of center, somewhere between collector and hobbyist.
Yeah, and I sort of move, right? I don't like, sometimes I play the game pretty casually, and I just come in and experience it like once a week or maybe once every 2 weeks, and it kind of ebb and flow based on what else is going on in my life. How busy am I at work? Do I have vacation planned and saved up, or do I have people in town or whatever? And other times I just kind of like get into like a rhythm, and it's like the thing I'm playing like 3-4 times a week,
and see your family for weeks at a time.
Yeah, I mean, but I
think
that was, you know, like, that's one of the things that I really enjoy about the game, is that I can sort of play at my own pace and sort of pick my like level of engagement. And so I think we talked about this earlier, you know, like when you guys were thinking about you know, building the foundation for Destiny 2, I think it's fair to say we erred on the side of those casual experiences, because we were looking at it as like, this is an entry point for all players, right? This is a time to tell a new story, a great cinematic campaign, and revisit and rebuild new worlds and make big systemic changes. What we would classify, I think, as like break some bones, right? That we could reset or do some things differently. And obviously that was encouraged by quite a bit of the feedback we had around Destiny 1. Destiny 1's core story, or Destiny 1's engagement model that people, you know, quite rightly at times kind of criticize for being a little bit too aggressive and demanding a little bit too much time for too little reward for players. And I think that's sort of where we find ourselves now, is we over-indexed a little bit. We've got a bunch of players in the hobbyist camp, such as ourselves, who are looking for a little bit
more to do, like
more reasons to log in, more things to collect.
Like an example from my own life, Mark has heard me like talk about how, you know, when the game came out on PC, I was like, I'm only gonna make one character. I'm gonna play the one character.
To rule them all.
The one character casual experience. Like, I'm just gonna try to play in a way that's like totally compatible.
After having already done 3 characters.
After having already done 3 characters to 305 on console. I got the Titan leveled up, and then I started to look across the aisle and be like, oh man, but I really want to make my Warlock, and I really want to get a Hunter up and running. And so I've ended up like leveling all 3 characters. And what I've done now is I have all those characters approaching 300, so you can get an idea in about a month of play, like a month of like pretty casual play. I'm close to the power cap, and on one hand that's like really positive. On one hand that's really good. It's totally compatible with life. But on the other hand, you could make a case that like maybe that's not okay. Maybe I shouldn't have access to the full suite of power. Maybe power's been over democratized in some ways. As you know, it's one of the only like game facing, like player facing pursuits in the game, and so maybe because of that, it should have been slower. And I think that's an example. Like, these are the sorts of conversations we're having here internally and talking about it. And I think with this ultimate, like, if you were try to like extract out one thing from that anecdote, it's, you know, players are looking for more excuses to play, and like, this is, you know, the benefit that we have now with Destiny 2 is we can look at the types of players that are playing the game and build things. Just like, we can focus on building systems for them. I'm not just gonna promise a bunch of content, because I know what we have in the pipe for DLC 1. It's got a campaign, and you know, the next DLC will too. And so we want to get to the place where we're aligning our systems and content. And but for content in the short run, and I think in the medium and long term with the Destiny franchise in general, we have to be looking at systems that lead to, you know, hobbyist play for all players.
I think like one of the reasons there's so much passion, I'll put it, on the internet right now about Destiny and this topic is because, like, if you think about that person who never played a game like this before and picked up Destiny 1, right, and made these friendships and suddenly was like, I'm making Destiny like one of my preferred pastimes. I'm going to play 15, 20, 30 hours a week, whatever it is, and met people playing the game. Maybe they met them in real life, but mostly still virtual, and they're playing, and then they roll into Destiny 2 and have a great time for a month, and then they start kind of running out of some stuff to do, and they don't have as many bars to fill. There's not as many things to chase potentially, and they don't have those same reasons to log in. They're like, but now I'm losing these friendships, right? Like I'm losing the connections I had with these people. I used to play 3 nights a week. Now we just fire it up Tuesday and maybe on Friday, and I'm missing that social connection. So I think some of that angst and concern comes from actually a really human place, and not just this like, naked desire to just play video games, but like the desire to have connection. Right?
Yeah, and I think that's at the heart of what we want Destiny to be, right? Like when we look at it from a like top line, like
a
perspective,
place where friendships
pillars.
are made.
Yeah, it's a place where friendships are made. It's a world you visit. It feels like a place that I'm going where I'm going to meet people and we're gonna accomplish fun stuff together. And so, I mean, I think it's also fair to say that is what we are now focusing on, like wholly as a studio, right? We have strike teams spun up to work on just about any aspect of the game that I think people are validly criticizing. If we are publishing this podcast in the time window that I think we're publishing this podcast, some of that information is available on our blog, and we'll have updated some of our short and midterm goals for players so they can see that it's serious for us. We're taking this serious. We hear the feedback. A lot of people are working on making Destiny better, and hopefully that'll also show players the like our propensity and appetite to publish what are work in progress aspects of the game, right? One of the things that makes communication so challenging is we want to make sure that we have our ducks in a row, like building experiences for Destiny because of the number of players that play it and the amount and variety of content they're playing means a lot of teams have to feed in and a lot of teams have to be committed to making the content and fitting it into their schedules. And so it's really difficult for us to come out quickly and say, we're doing X, Y, Z, because that means like, oh, did somebody tell the audio team that we're doing that? Did somebody tell the QA team that we're doing that? And how do we, because the scale is pretty huge, right? It's a pretty sizable endeavor in some ways, and other things are faster developments, and we try to jump on those. But I guess maybe that just kind of, maybe you guys can talk a little bit about like, why is it difficult sometimes to communicate out about what our aspirations and goals are for the game, and like specific things that we're going to do to make the experience better for players?
Do you want to start there?
Yeah, like, you already touched on one of the things, sort of like when you were talking about power, that agree with like, have we made it too easy to, reach max power? It should be a little bit less. Like that speaks to some of these like existential questions that like we're wrestling with and thinking about. And so it's not as simple to just say, hey, this one thing's not working the way we intended. Let's do this other thing and just run immediately in that direction. We wanted the game to come out and really look at player behavior. How are people? What are they actually doing? What are they, not just what they're saying, but what are they actually doing? Experiencing it ourselves. Formulate theories about what's happening and why. What could be better? What experience do we want to have if it's not the one that we were getting? And it takes time to figure a bunch of that out, right? And now a bunch of those arrows are in flight. And there's still some where we're still like, where are we going to fire this cannon? Like, should we go there or should we go here?
It's I think one of the things that's really important, although maybe the word is not super sexy, is you look at all those problems, the problems that you're perceiving, the problems you're hearing about, the problems that you're seeing in the truth of the truth of how people play the game and your own experiences. But then you have to prioritize them. Like you then have to say like, okay, well in this order we're going to tackle these problems in this order. And I think that really is where I think for us we historically have not been as clear as we could be with communicating some of that. I think Chris's post was like a month ago, which was awesome. I thought it was great, and we're I think that I think that I'm going to explain a little bit about where that about some of the work that's being done there. But we've got to figure out a cadence where we're going to give people more of an update. I think that I think that there are some games right now that do a really good job at explaining where we're headed, and I think we're historically really careful, because if we don't really know when it's going to land, like, it's just going to be another thorn in people's side, and we're not. Yeah, that's not what we want to do. So we'd rather.
Yeah,
it's
hard to say something without it being taken as a promise. Yep. Like, we're trying to find like what's the right balance there to like talk about our hopes and dreams and where we want to head, and what's a commitment versus an idea.
Commitment versus an aspiration.
Yeah, an aspiration. And some of the things that were aspirations 2 months ago are like, we think are like firming up as commitments now. We think we have a design for it, we're implementing it. We might even know when we think it might come out, but it's still up in the air based on these 3 other factors. And so should we wait to talk about it? The fact that communication is hard doesn't make it any
we're not making it's not an excuse. We're not making an excuse. We're just trying to provide context for why.
We need to do better here, right?
Yeah.
And like, at the end of the day, like, actions speak louder than words. Yep. Right. And so I think, we're trying to detail this week, here's some things we're going to do. And within a week, you're going to experience them. Within 2 weeks, you're going to experience some more. And other things coming in January.
Yeah, and the expectations game is pretty challenging too, right? You want to make sure that you have concrete information to supply people about what they can expect, as opposed to sort of nebulous, hey, we want to do X, Y, Z, but we don't have a timetable for it, and then we're left to sort of like give them updates as development works the kinks out of those processes, and people start to dig in. It's much better to have frequent communication where we're giving people defined spaces and things that they can look forward to. So that's also challenging as well. And I think that leads to those periods of, I don't know if I would call it paralysis, but where we really want to talk about the things that we're working on, but we don't feel it's responsible to do so, right? Where we're like, the team has yet to commit fully that they can pull this off by this date. Yeah. And we need to give them the wiggle room to explore it and figure out if they can do it. I think Masterworks and the sort of general updates that are hitting for 12.12 fall into that category, right? We really wanted to get out there and tell people, like, we totally hear you. We totally agree. We're working on these very specific things that we want to deliver. They're not going to, fix everything. They're not going to address every piece of feedback, but we think it's going to demonstrate that we're making strides, that we hear you, and we're going to take action. I think that is the most important. Like, the "we hear you" has become such a cliche. Without the action at the end of it, it's like, who gives a shit if you hear me? What are you doing, right? What are the things you're going to put into the game? And I think that part is challenging, because we've got our PC launching, DLC 1 team cranking away and marching towards ZBB and their delivery dates, and underneath that, this other team that's working on these other things
happening.
And like what's hard to get across, and it falls into the camp that I really don't like talking about, which is game development's really complex and hard, because as somebody, if you're a customer that's paid $60, like, why do I care how hard it is? I just want to have a great experience with my friends. Yeah. But there is a practical reality in development that these things are, they have to take their time, the natural course through the development. They have to be resourced. Thing is, like,
our audience is, I think, of players is unusually sophisticated. Like they care a lot about the game and deeply and want to know about the systems. And like I think if you compare it to a community for another game, there's an expectation of understanding of what we're doing and where we're going greater than you would have for just another standard shooter.
Yeah.
Right.
You and I talked over the weekend, Eric, about we 2 weeks ago when we did the first Osiris stream, or 3 weeks ago by now.
Yep.
We didn't actually, like, in that moment, we were not sure if Masterworks would be ready for December 12th. Like, otherwise, this is the type of content, that type of quality of the updates that you're waiting for. How are the game systems getting better? That's the type of thing that we want to lead with generally, but because of the timelines, and it's just hey, because reasons. But like these are the reasons that mean that it comes up when it comes up, when we can talk about it, and we don't want to say, well, here we're going to talk about this thing that we don't know. We don't exactly know when it's going to come out, because we did a version of that in October too, with Chris's like thoughtful words in the blog post. But I wonder if in hindsight we should have said, like, hey, we have a bunch of those updates that we're planning. We don't know we don't know when they're gonna land yet. We're doing it. We're trying to get stuff ready for December. But what we can talk about now is the Osiris content. We know you're looking for this other thing, and I think we I don't know if we had that conversation or made that statement like it clear enough. It didn't feel like it.
I think the climate changed pretty dramatically from Stream 1 to Stream 2, right?
Sure.
Like the Stream 1 was like, yeah, that's pretty cool. It looks good. Nice story. I got it. Cool. Characters are pretty cool.
Osiris looks rad.
Art looks sick. I mean, because like, oh my God, look at the skybox. Look at Mercury. But then we had sort of a turn
I'm finally
happen.
getting to go to the lighthouse.
Yep. So like there's having the foresight to know like, hey, like these things should be sequenced in a different way, and then there's having the ability to actually sequence them in a different way. So but yeah, like in hindsight, and I think even in foresight, we kind of knew like this one's not going to go down as well as we want it to, because we just need to talk about these whatever we want to call these quality of play, or like
just game system updates
for players who are playing the game.
I think this is worth talking about. Like, what does it take to update the game? Because the thing I see online is people saying like, well, how is it that you guys can update this one thing really quickly but not this other element, right? It seems really selective.
There's literally a post on Reddit today that's like, here's proof that Bungie can update the game easily, and you're like, okay.
And so it feels like it's worth like covering this a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Like anytime a bug in the live game comes up, we have to like evaluate it in a few different ways. There's 3 questions we asked, right? Like, how severe is this thing? How long will it take to fix it? And when can it be safely tested and deployed?
Yep.
Right? And those 3 things together combine into an answer about like, well, when are we going to be able to do it? And like if we talked about each one a little bit more, like how severe is something? And this is like, what's the impact of the bug? Like, how bad is it when the bad thing happens? Like, is it breaking the entire game? Like, does it crash all over the place? Is it, jeopardizing the economy? Is it ruining activity so people don't want to play it anymore? And like, this one's tough because it's totally subjective. Like, it completely comes down to like, well, how bad do we really think it is? And has anyone noticed it yet? Like, does it really screw us or not? Can it wait for the next expansion to be fixed, or is this something we got to try to get on the next boat?
Yep.
Right. And
is
so,
there a boat? When is the next boat?
Yes, and that gets into one of the next things. And so, just independently of how it gets fixed or whatever, is like, is it that big of a deal or not? And so, things can come up and we're like, yeah, that's a big deal, right? And then you go to the next one. Right, which is, okay, some things can be fixed really easy. Some things can be fixed server side. And sometimes this is like a matchmaking setting, right? Or you take the XP issue we had over the last week. This is something that happened to be on a server flag, and we could like change that one number. That's awesome. But the something like, the host migration issue with the Callus fight is not some trivial thing we can just flick a switch on in the data center. It doesn't work that way. There's stuff that's in the client, right? Then you have, on the back end, server side switch can fix some things. Your next easiest thing, which is still complex, is when it's just data, right?
Yeah.
Look, the gun does this much damage. Let's change the damage on that gun in this way. That still requires a patch though, right? Because that's in the client. That goes into your Xbox, right? Like that needs to be packaged up and then sent down to your Xbox.
Or your PlayStation.
Or now your PC. Just throwing us some love to the Xbox.
I'm just making sure that we're getting all the bases covered.
And well, now that Scorpio's out, like there's a lot of people in the office that are playing on Scorpio, and I see lots of folks talking about it and excited and buying their 4K TVs. So, and then the last one is when it touches code, right? Like once you need to actually touch code, you're generating brand new binaries. We have to rebuild the entire game. Think of like building the game like making dinner from like ingredients from scratch, and then that has to get deployed, right? And so those are like various degrees of challenge. And then the last thing is, how, like, what's it going to take to fix this, right? The fact that it's just data doesn't mean it's going to be easy, right? The test surface of fixing, like something could take 1 minute to fix and 3 weeks for us to actually test and deploy, right? Just because something's easy to fix doesn't mean it's easy to deploy to the world. We have a bunch of the games, runs out of our data centers, and a bunch of code and content have to make it there as well. And so, if I give like one precise example here, like a case study, the bureaucratic walk emote, right?
Yep.
This thing happened and it was like totally fucking up PvP. And Trials was about to come out, right? And it was like, oh, you can get inside the wall and just shoot dudes. We're like, okay, severity, like pretty high, right? Pinnacle activity is boned. How easy is it to fix? Yeah. It's pretty easy to fix this, we think, ultimately. Medium difficulty to test it, because the fix is like not hard code, or even just remove the emote from the game would be another fix. That wouldn't be that hard, but it wasn't server side, so we couldn't do that. Testing that fix is like pretty hard, right? Like that's a say medium level difficulty. And then the last, even if we checked all those boxes, then the last step, deploy that thing. Well, that was a window of development when we were just getting everything lined up and ready to ship the PC. And that meant we were trying to keep our services environments in the data center and our code base and everything really tight and clean and not change anything. Because when you're about to like turn the game on for millions of people, you need to make sure that that thing works. And you don't want to touch anything. So we basically entered this like blackout period for a couple weeks. It was maybe like 7 to 10 days where we didn't want to patch the game unless it was like tragic, like just horrible, right? And this is taking me like 4 or 5 minutes to explain. And so it's like these are things that just don't go out easily in tweets. And so we made the decision that we're gonna punt Trials for a couple weeks because we can't pull the emote from the game. We don't have a current easy way to just pull the emote from the game. And so some things are easy to fix and some things are hard.
Yeah, and it's not always just fixes either. Like, we can't vertically stack work forever on these teams. We have to make sure that they have clarity and the breathing room to deliver at quality. It's really hard to pull these things off, and we have to make sure that people are not gassed when we're pushing big buttons that ultimately mean millions of people are going to experience either a working title or a game they cannot play, right? And so those are the kind of priority scales we look at, right, at the very top line. And it seems, I think, a lot of times when you see it from the outside that each of these independent pieces is in a vacuum and sort of isolation. It's got to be super easy. Look, you can do, on one hand, you can do this really fast over here. We saw this in like 3 years ago with the heavy ammo bug in Crota, right? Seemed like a really simple fix, but it was like so entangled with so many systems and so many different aspects of the game that it was like, like open heart surgery, like, oh my God, like if we mess the fix up, it could literally crash the entire like gameplay systems and make every experience poor versus this moment in a raid. And we were hearing from people. And I think another example too of a space where we look back, we should have just jumped on it earlier, but we were waiting for teams to give us confidence that, because at the time they were like, we don't know if we can even fix this. This may be that bad, right? This may be we clip the wire and the bomb goes off and that's it. And so we have to deal with this long term. And looking back on that, I think that's another example of where, we could have been a little bit more bullish in the approach and said, no, we're still going to go out there and talk to the community and let them know that this is really challenging and that the fixes may not be for short term, right? It may not be there for them quickly. And I think they probably would have not enjoyed that answer. It wouldn't have been a great answer, but it would have been better than what we did, which was not say anything for a pretty long time.
I think that's like one of the big takeaways to me looking at the run here is to figure out a better way to provide the context that I think a lot of it, like in addition to the thing Mark talked about earlier, like the real human like social pain that people feel when they log into their hobby and people aren't around. I think the other part is just like it's kind of the frustration of not knowing what the hell's going on. like what the hell are those guys doing? Why aren't they talking? Like I haven't said anything about the game for months, which is totally intentional. But like this week, I put those two little tweets back to back out about this week because and the response that I saw in general was like really positive. Like I think people, were just looking for in many cases, they're just looking for information. They're looking for they just want to believe that it's going to be okay. And I think that's going to be, this is one of the things that when he's back, like Chris and Eric and I'll sit down and talk about like how should we do that. I have some ideas, but it's going to be, Chris's full-time job is to oversee Destiny 2, and he's going to do a great job. And one of the things we're going to have to figure out a way to do is get the communication from the development team. I think Deej and Cosmo are doing a great job, but we're not, I think, on the development side providing enough information to them to arm them with the goods to take to a place like to take to TWAB or to take to some forum on the internet or whatever. Like, we haven't, and in part I think that's because the development team we're conservative. Like, a lot of what we've been talking about is the conservative. The conservative processes that we use to try to ensure stability. And that's part of the reason why, generally, historically, I think we've done a pretty good job of keeping the game up and running. And so there's some line. I don't think we've totally found the right line yet. Yeah. And we're gonna take new steps to get there.
I think that's probably a good segue, and we mentioned it earlier, but to sort of jump into the XP conversation. Definitely a challenging one. I think in PR you classify this conversation as breaking into jail, meaning that if we talk about this, we're going to get coverage and people are going to make headlines about it, and we're going to stoke the conversation, which seems to be antithetical to a business strategy, but we think it's probably valuable to talk about because in the absence of information, I think people will rightly so move themselves to believe that we initiated this system or created this system to fuck them, right? To be shitty, greedy jerks.
For anyone who's listening to the podcast for the first time, or who've been on a rock for the last week, after level 20, we were scaling up or scaling down XP earned based on specific activities that you played.
Yep.
Which makes sense for a bunch of design goals and reasons, and that certain activities should be more rewarding than others. But unfortunately, the UI was not reflecting the way it was being scaled, and so it was misrepresenting what was happening. And so we turned off that scaler on the weekend. But then we didn't update the API, and so it seemed like we didn't fully turn it off, or there's something else going on behind the hood, and that's getting sorted. And so that all happened, and now that the scaler's gone, and we're going to see how does it play? How does this work? Does this meet the design goals or not? Right. So that's where we're at, logistically with the whole thing.
Yeah, I think that also dovetails, or sort of reflects back on the conversation you had about risk and scale, and certain things are easy to do and certain things are difficult to do. That was actually on a server flag. So as we sort of got into the war room and said okay, this doesn't look great. This is not the intent of the system. We understand that no one is going to believe us, but we want to turn this off. Can we turn this off? And we got the people in the room who could look at it, and they said, oh, yep, this is just a flag. We could turn this off. And then we said, okay, what happens when we turn it off? And they said, well, we've never done that. So if we do it, we're going to find out. There's some risk associated here. And we decided to take that risk. So one of the risks and one of the ramifications that has happened is, although now you no longer have your XP coming down when you do when you grind public events for a significant duration, the boost that was happening when you were at the lower end for activities that were just sort of chill mode activities isn't kicking in. So it's
a lot longer activities.
Yeah, so it's now there's at the bottom end you're not getting as much rewards as we would like you to get, right? And the system was designed to sort of try to even that out, try to equalize that, and say no matter what you're doing, no matter how much time you're spending, you're going to get rewarded at a rate that we think is good, that we think is purposeful, and we think you can predict, and we think that feels great. Every session that you have with the game is going to give you some rewards. So now the work is, all right, now we think this current state is better than the old state given what we know, right? We don't like the fact that the UI was not giving people a correct look at what they were earning in XP. We don't feel like that's something that we want in the game, so we've ripped it out. And now we have to say, okay, now let's look at the data and refactor all of our activities and find out what are reasonable rates for these. And that's going to be a little bit longer until we can dig in on that and purposefully craft that experience. And it'll be UI work, engineering work, activities work, design work, test work, and that'll be an ongoing conversation. So we're going to be really transparent about it. Any changes that we make, we're going to make sure we put them out there. Obviously, it's a hot issue for us, but it's not one that we wanted to duck or dodge or not talk about. And we knew, like, just coming out, like, you know, we had some players out there that had looked at it. They had done the data work. They had put together some really cool charts and graphs.
Like really,
and in fact, like, I was like,
Mark
is this real?
And Mark and I were talking about this at our desks, like, about, like, man, like, we should talk to that individual about employment opportunities. Like, just the demonstrable rigor,
like,
is incredible.
And diligence, right?
And we're like I am not mad that happened. I am glad that got surfaced, and I'm glad we, you know, made the choice to pull that out of the game. And even with the risks and the sort of, like, the game is not in an optimal state, right, for certain types of players or players that play a lot of different activities, but I still think it's the right call, and really the only call that we could make given the circumstances. And I know a lot of players out there are going to say, you're full of rich, creamy shit. You only did it because you caught with your hand in the cookie jar. And I think I'm okay with that, right? I think, once again, like, our actions are going to speak louder than our words. I think long term, it's on us to make sure that players who play the game feel rewarded, feel like their time is well spent. That is one of our goals, and I believe we're going to deliver on that long term. But I don't think anybody needs to take me at my word on that. I think it's up to us to deliver those experiences to players, and you know, proof's in the pudding.
Like, I think it's interesting when, you know, our progression economy, you know, designers, they're the guys who focus on leveling and rewards. When they're, you know, designing systems, they're trying to make sure two things are true, like that it's not open till exploitation, right? Yep. But also that, like, hey, if you get a bad beat, you know, there's something that's going to help you catch up, some sort of catch up mechanism, or, you know, we want to make that overall experience of getting rewards really good and smooth and balanced, right? And so there's a lot of stuff that gets done under the hood all over the place, to make the magic work. Yeah,
there's a lot of, like, streak protection, like, in activities. Like, just to give you another example, just like in activities like the raid, we have streak protections that you won't miss on a reward, like, n times. Like, you'll actually, like, it'll, like, the number gets, you know, it gets increasingly more favorable. You know, we have I think it's in the December update, we have the exotic duplicate protection that's rolling out, so you won't like crack open.
If it's not in there, then we'll update that. I'm not going to edit that out. We'll update that with the
10
right
current
time.
scenes in a row. Like, but like that's a real problem, and you know, the team has a solution for it. And so, you know, I think some of it is they're trying to prevent the bad beat, and the other part, you're totally right. It's about, you know, preventing, you know, like horrible exploits, because that ultimately just leads to players, you know, doing the thing that's like hyper, like overly efficient, but maybe not overly fun.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. Like, the psychology of it is interesting too, because people are compelled, certain types of people, myself included at times, are compelled to find the like maximal route to the best stuff, right? And so that means, like, I would rather be playing Crucible with my friends right now, but instead I'm going to go grind this other activity that I find less satisfying, or that isn't really like the best use of my time in terms of my overall entertainment value. But I'm going to do it anyway because I feel like the game is compelling me to do that. And so these systems are also there in place to say, like, you don't need to feel compelled to grind public events forever. Because they're paying out more rewards. Crucible's cool too. You should go over there because it's also going to pay out. And so, like,
the loot cave, I think, you know, from Destiny 1 is an interesting example, and I think it has like remained in our psyche since it happened. Yeah. Like the brokenness of the game at that point, like of Destiny 1's loot cave, like it honestly, I think wasn't that bad from an economy standpoint. Yeah. Like it was not the best way to get legendaries in the game or exotics. Like if you went and played other activities, they would actually pay out better on a you know, reward per minute basis.
Yeah, factually, when we looked at the data behind it, it was not the optimal way to play. It wasn't even close.
But more damaging for us at the time, and this is, I think, like has what stayed with us, is the PR it generated, right? And like the memes about like Destiny and like that this unfun activity reinforced the narrative that like Destiny 1 wasn't generous enough and you're better off firing into a cave than playing these other activities that actually are pretty fun to play. And that narrative was actually true at that point.
Yeah.
Like Destiny wasn't generous enough in a
I was
bunch
gonna
of
say,
ways.
It's like,
It wasn't.
To me, it's not the PR; it's the actual truth behind it.
No,
it's
it
a
was
divining
not.
rod.
It was not
right?
untrue. But
yeah.
then the broad meme is just like that. Destiny is a game with an RPG. Has RPG elements and it's broken, right?
Yep.
And that was like. That hurt,
Yep.
and people worked really hard on the game to make a sweet economy and have cool rewards, and there was this exploit, and that sucks. And I think that certainly has stayed with us, and so if you're building a new system, one of the first things someone's thinking about is like, well, how's it going to be exploited? Like, what if we don't see this, or is there some way this is going to ruin the economy? And that's kind of like it's just an element that you have to consider, right? But in the same hand, like the design's job is not to make a bunch of systems that can't be exploited or never fail. It's to make something that's balanced, that's just fun in the long run, that's rewarding. And that means, looking for things that might be exploits, but also overcorrecting for the other side when you just get unlucky. Yeah. Right.
My parents both have what I would describe as real jobs. Yeah. Like they have like jobs that involve like my mom has been a nurse for a long time and like has had a variety of like jobs that are, I think really impactful in a very human way. And I think of some of that part like the take your medicine part of having the job where you get to make electronic toys. Yep. In a bunch of ways. Like you get to create fun experiences.
Not those type of electronic toys.
Yeah,
video games. We're talking about video games.
Yeah, you get to create fun experiences that you hope players will like, and a bunch of that, as much as people have talked about it's challenging, and it totally is, creating entertainment's like incredibly hard, but the medicine part of that is you have to take your medicine. You have to be okay with what people are going to say, and then you also have to, I think, in a bunch of ways, compartmentalize that and then extract the value from it and figure out what to do next. It's not,
you have to like distill it down and figure out like what is the essence here, right?
Yeah, it's not like feedback is, ordering at Subway. Like do this on this checklist. Like I want ham, cheese, turkey, and I want all those things in mayo. Like that's not what it is. It's really like, oh, they're hungry, like, and they're interested in some carbohydrates. Like, okay, like what can we prepare that's that?
Mark's hungry. You got him on the carbohydrates now.
He's
not actually.
He's
I'm doing no carbs right now.
He's on a cleanse right now. Yeah.
So, I mean, is there
no
any
sugar,
other pressing
no vegetable oils?
You guys want
no
to talk
soy,
about?
no dairy. It's pretty intense.
Is it? I mean, I leave it to you. But is it worth talking about why Mark and I don't talk?
Yeah, no offense. I don't think people really care who's up there with the messages, right? It's just like,
it's
are
like
we getting the right amount of
storm.
information?
Yeah.
Are we getting what we need from Bungie, the studio, right? Yeah. And so that can come from Deej, it can come from me, it can come from Cosmo, it can come from any number of people on the development team who represent a specific area of focus or, are providing direction on products. So I think it's really just about keeping the conversation rolling and making sure we're using all the channels. I'm cognizant I'm saying that as we're heading into the holidays. So there is a little bit of a wind down that happens every year as we sort of, come into the holiday period.
There's mid-December with studio.
So please be cognizant of that. But yeah, I think we've got a commitment from a lot of people at the studio to make sure that we keep the conversation rolling, that we're a little bit more open about what's coming down the pipe, both short and mid and long term. And I think, we will have to be really careful about how we present those things and provide context around what they really mean for timetables and all that fun stuff. So it'll definitely be a process for us, and it's not going to be perfect coming out of the gate. We're going to have different people coming into the seats because of, as you guys have reflected, like, Barry's out for personal stuff. Justin is filling in for him. Both those guys would be great to be talking to the community right now because they're very attached to what's happening and directly working on that stuff. But timing being what it is, we have other people that can talk to folks.
Instead, you got us.
Yeah.
I think that I think for me, one thing that's worth mentioning that's unrelated to really all of this, but when I was being walked through the December changes for Destiny 2, as a player, I was incredibly excited for a bunch of them because I felt like I was going to have sort of a renewed vigor for playing the game, not just through there's not like one like silver bullet solution there, but there's a bunch of cool things that are, I think, pretty exciting additions. I think that we're gonna have better stuff to do with your currencies, strictly better stuff to do. Better stuff to chase and things like Masterworks, which I think of really as a foundational system that I hope people like, and if they like it, we'll continue to grow it. And
as I said, it's not the silver bullet, like you said. It's not like, there it is, all of your feedback's been addressed, right? We think it's now in an optimal state, right? It's like these are hopefully what people will perceive as steps in the right direction and systems that make the game better and improve it, specifically for people who love Destiny and want reasons to come back and play it. But we're not done. We're going to keep working on exactly those systems, and they're going to become more and more of the focus as we go, and probably the primary focus, I would say, over the course of the next few months for our studio. So hopefully that'll in turn mean that information gets ramped up purposefully as those new features that are specific to that come online.
Yep. And I think this week we probably talked a little bit about, we talked about the December stuff.
Yep.
And hopefully we're talking a little bit about the January stuff. Like we're already people are hard at work on, wrapping December update and then also moving on to another round of improvements in January, which I believe are supposed to be targeting prestige activities, which is a thing that, I would love as a player to have more reasons to engage with. I was talking to Mark this morning when I got in about my adventures in the Prestige Nightfall, and how I think like many players would love to have a reason to do that each week, because I think if you're a challenge junkie and you want to think about your loadout and try to find the optimal thing to get through this scenario, I think there's more stuff we could offer you for that.
The cake is good. It needs better icing.
I think so, and I think that's the other thing. Like the icing is actually a hugely important part to our players, and it's a part that is the reasons to play, and that is the area where we have to be making consistent and frequent improvements, and that totally is the focus of the Destiny 2 team.